Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you here on the air. Glad to be here on this Thursday edition. Coming up in just a little bit, our pal Chelsea Messenger will jump in, talk a little betting with us here on the program today. Our weekly visit from Tim Fitzgerald postponed a week. Fitz is on vacation, and we will get to that again then next week. All kinds of stuff. As you can imagine, another shocking development in the college realignment saga that continues. And, we continue to follow this so closely because it will impact, Kansas State, maybe even Wichita State. So we'll keep our pulse on that and let you know what the very latest is. We've got the NFL preseason more or less officially starting. I know we had the Hall of Fame game, but you'll actually see some meaningful things tonight. Texans, Patriots, get that underway. Looking forward to more of the preseason. We'll have some sound coming at you from Chiefs training camp. Still no Chris Jones, by the way, as they get ready for their preseason opener on Sunday. All kinds of good stuff coming. We have giveaways. We have rock and roll tickets to Def Leppard and Motley Crue coming for you. We've got country music tickets to Thomas Rhett coming for you. We've got movie tickets to the Blue Beetle, get a special sneak peek coming for you, and some iced tea from HTO coming for you as well. So make sure that you've got your thumb on that IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll get you those opportunities to win throughout the show today. Thanks for listening to us here on KFH. Thanks for watching us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, on our video stream. Tommy, how are you?
I'm good. Happy Thursday. Glad to be here today. We are inching closer and closer to the first weekend of NFL preseason football. And so I know it's the preseason, but I'm excited for it. I'm ready to get it underway. I'm looking forward to getting into it today.
Another in the story that just came out too, Tommy, that will, I guess it didn't just come out. I'm just seeing it. Texas A&M shut down an NIL fund after some IRS issues. So we can get into that as well a little bit later in the show too. It is that time of year where we kind of wait and sit. And this time of year, this time around, we've had conference realignment in full swing. And, just sort of, I think, Tommy, like the last couple of weeks, it was like something's going to happen with this Pac-12 deal. Like something's going to happen. And lo and behold, it did. Florida State in that August 15th deadline just kind of keeps everything right there. Like, are we going to do one more round of this before we get into the season? Because it feels like it's totally possible. And I think it's why we're hearing all the rumors out east with the ACC. So, since we talked yesterday, you basically have the Cal and Stanford meetings happening. The momentum has been muzzled just a little bit on that. SMU trying to perhaps do crazy things, and Notre Dame getting involved. Just another wild ride as we try to see how this all shakes out, Tommy.
Yeah, and I know that as every day that comes up, there's a new story and there's a new new information about what's happening with different conferences and different schools and things like that. And that's going to continue. Like, I don't have any doubt in my mind that as we move forward day in and day out, we're going to hear new things each day because it is ever evolving and ever changing. We've got presidents from, the schools that are scrambling to try to find a new conference that are having conversations. We've got some schools that are in other conferences like the ACC who are wondering if expansion is the right thing for them. They're having conversations. And then meanwhile, you've got Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, who is talking about changes to the college football playoff because of the conference realignment, which we got into a little bit yesterday. I thought it was interesting too. We didn't mention this yesterday, but Sankey said that he felt a great deal of empathy for the Pac-12 and everything that happened with them, and personally reached out to presidents and athletic directors in the Pac-12 to express his sympathy with what was going on. I found that a little bit ironic because the SEC has driven this entire thing. Right. But regardless of that, we're going to see more and more developments happen, I would imagine, on a daily basis until this all settles down.
It's been very strange to see some of the stuff from Sankey in the SEC the last couple of days. Like, oh man, we're just so sad that the foundation and the history of college football, and gosh darn it, like this is just so sad. Hey dude, like remember who the original poachers are in all of this. And
Right.
it's you guys, whether it was A&M and Missouri, whether it was more recently Texas and Oklahoma. Like the SEC has driven this forever in their partnership with ESPN. And I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but it is funny to see him now come in, that it's not them that have done this round of poaching, and just, sort of talk about the travesty that's occurring. Come on now. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can either, try to hang on to the lifeboat of an old model that was never going to work out as long as coaches were making millions of dollars, and, weight rooms like the one we saw unveiled at Kansas yesterday, which everybody's talking about, roll out there. None of that happens if you don't maximize the earning potential of your programs, which means you get in bed with television networks. And again, I think that I'm fine with all of that, but let's not pretend when we're the, maybe biggest behind the scenes advocate of change and money making and all these things, that you have much sympathy at all for what's happened out on the West Coast. Was it avoidable? Probably. Do I believe him that he, in his mind, envisioned them being viable out there? Probably, because I think they designed, part of which he may have been the biggest proponent, this new CFP to allow for that league in particular to have a place in it. So while I understand that, you can't have sympathy when you're the driving force behind all of this, right? Like, the SEC and its dominance and its vast earning potential is the reason we're seeing these shifts. And this fallacy of fairness that's tried to be portrayed forever, for our whole lives, is now very clearly not the case. And it's just that we're sort of embracing it now, right? Like, look, there are certain programs across the country that are inherently more valuable than others. And that's just the way it's going to be. Now, I think it's an interesting time, because I actually think the field has never been more level than it is right now, which is what makes the old guard squirm a little bit. It's what made the old guard squirm a little bit in college basketball. It is more work on the coaches. I get why some of the long timers were like, yep, don't want to have anything to do with that. But it does even the playing field to some degree. And that makes people uncomfortable too. It is the way it is, Tommy. And like the biggest elephant in the room has always been player compensation, which will happen at some point. That's the other reason everybody's trying to earn as much as they can, because they know they can't hold on to this weird, wacky, borderline illegal model of not compensating these players for their work. So they'll stall as long as they can. They'll push it off on NILs, then they'll complain about the NILs. And then eventually we're going to see dust settling and we'll see players compensated. I mean, it's coming. I don't know how soon it's coming, but it's coming. And so you better get into a position where your programs can earn the most they can earn, because they're going to have to start sharing at some point.
I think that really what this shift has indicated, there have always been the haves and the have-nots in college athletics. It's been that way forever. This is nothing new. Your Alabamas and your Notre Dames and these major programs. Now Georgia is up there. These major Ohio State, major programs that have the value, the eyeballs, the revenue, all of that. There have always been haves and have-nots. But I think that what has happened over the years is that the NCAA they've wanted everybody to just pretend that everybody's on a level playing field. Even though we know that that's not the case, I think that's been the narrative that they've wanted everybody to just believe in. That, okay, well, like, Alabama's in the same conference as some of these other programs that don't have that kind of value, or OU is in a conference or Texas is in a conference where the other teams don't have that kind of value, but we're just going to pretend that that's not the case and create a level playing field as best as we can and pretend like everybody's on the same page. Now, I think what we're doing is everybody is acknowledging the elephant in the room, that yes, there's the haves and there's the have-nots. And how do we make sure, and I guess from a TV network perspective, how do you make sure that the haves are in front of as many eyeballs on it as possible. And that's really where this landscape shift has happened. So I can imagine that, from the mind of somebody at ESPN or somebody at Fox, they have been looking at these different conferences and looking at, okay, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the SEC or hundreds of millions of dollars on the Big Ten. How do we maximize our investment? How do we make sure we get the best return possible on the money that we are spending with these conferences? By strengthening the conference, by bringing in more marquee programs, more of the haves, concentrating them in as few conferences as possible. And so I think that really what we've done, what has happened over the last 2 years, starting with Texas and OU and moving all the way to now, is finally opening up our eyes, everybody collectively. We all knew it. Now we're just admitting it, that yes, there are programs that inherently have significantly more value than others. And those are the ones that are going to be up on a pedestal and make the most money. It's just as simple as that.
And it's fine that exists, because that's always existed, right? Like,
Yeah.
under the table money is now on top of the table money, which is a good thing. That will level the playing field. Right now, everybody has an opportunity to do what some places have been able to do better and take care of players under the table. You can ignore it. You can pretend like it doesn't happen. You can do whatever you want. We live in reality on this show. So I can tell you that it happens, and it has happened, and it did happen. I went to a Division II school, Tommy, and to a much smaller degree. Like, I knew about stuff that was like, come on. Now, let's be real. Let's be honest with ourselves, and let's fix a model that never made any sense whatsoever from a legal perspective. We all just loved it because we wanted to pretend like it's like the Olympics, pretending like the Olympics is full of amateur athletes. Like, come on now. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it's okay to acknowledge and to understand that this is a money-making endeavor, especially when you consider everything that money is used for, right? It makes universities better. So we got to just figure out the last few details of how to make it work. I've said from the very beginning of all of this, my only fear is that teams that have always been a part of the ability to win a national championship get pushed out. That's the only part of this where I said that is, can't have that happen. As long as everybody is playing for the same national championship still, you're going to have coast-to-coast appeal. Now, it's going to be a little bit different, but I would argue that you've never had a better opportunity at Kansas State to win a national championship than you have now and will have moving forward in a 12-team playoff, as long as the Big 12 has a place, and it clearly will. Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford really are the only teams in danger of losing that, but they're not in danger of losing that. Even if they went to the Mountain West, we saw Cincinnati in the CFP. Is it harder? Yeah, probably. The margin of error is shorter, but for those people that say the regular season doesn't matter now, those teams can't lose a game and get in, right? And it matters because if a really, really, really good team doesn't start the year with their hair on fire and maybe loses 2 games out of its first 6, they could still, in theory, play their way in. That makes the regular season more interesting, not less interesting. When more teams are viable to win it, it makes it more interesting. I've never understood that. Well, it makes the regular season mean more to have the BCS. No, it doesn't.
No.
It boxes out 99% of the teams in the country. They know they have no shot. That doesn't make the regular season more interesting. That makes it less interesting. Why is the regular season in the NFL, in Major League Baseball, in the NBA more interesting? Because teams can actually get into the postseason. So we've got that part mostly handled. Let's see how 12 teams does. I think that's probably going to be perfect. Maybe they could go to 16. I don't really care, quite frankly, as long as it's more than 4 and as long as your conference champions have a chance to get in. Now, We may not have 5 conference champions anymore. We may have 4 for a little while until we figure that part out, and that's okay too. I never wanted to see any of the Power 5 leagues fold, but the Pac-12 just didn't do the right stuff. The Pac-12 could have avoided this. I mean, it could have avoided this. Not even, it wouldn't have even been that hard had they expanded the second USC and UCLA left. Like that very second, they should have expanded. And even if it wasn't an outright merger, they could have easily expanded to some really viable teams, and they would not be in this position now. They just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so they didn't do that. And it's an unfortunate circumstance. And I feel for the teams that are being left out. And I understand their frustration. And they're absolutely right when they blame conference leadership. And again, like if you don't embrace these changes, the Pac-12 should be your shining example of the fate that you will succumb to. Like you can dig your heels in on this old model and dream about the Rose Bowl of 1984 all you want, but that ain't the future. It's not. And teams are finally like, you know what? Like we got to do something else here. This isn't going to work. And so now we have what we have, and we'll see what happens with the ACC. I think the ACC will survive, not as it currently stands, but if you are the ACC and you have 2 very clear models of how this is going to go, which are the Pac-12 and the Big 12, then it's an easy decision. And why would they ever consider adding Cal and Stanford right now? And why should they be pushing these precedents, even if it costs you a little money now to do it? Because your league will still stand. You know at least 2 teams are leaving, right? Florida State for sure, probably Clemson. Let's just say it's those 2. Boom, you've got replacements set up and ready to go. SMU's willing to come join your league and, according to reports, not make any money for a while. Like they've got some boosters that said, we'll foot the bill. You like just get in because the getting's good right now. That's forward-thinking leadership.
Yeah.
If you've got boosters that are willing to say, guys, just get in, don't make any money from the media rights deal for a few years, we'll cover that, get in there because you may never have a chance to get in again.
Yep.
If this thing consolidates again, SMU's not getting in anywhere. So if they got a chance to get in somewhere now, you get in now. That's why you're seeing that stuff. That's forward-thinking. That's smart. So when Notre Dame, by the way, is pushing the ACC to do this, and you're like, well, why is Notre Dame doing that? Because they know that it's going to die when they get poached if they're not thinking about this stuff now. And man, how many times do we have to see the same story, Tommy, to see this? The ACC has 1 or 2 choices. They go the way of the Big 12 or they go the way of the Pac-12. That's it. Like that's what's going to happen. Teams are leaving.
The blueprint is there, like you mentioned, 2 different directions, 2 very clear directions, and 2 histories on how it worked for the Pac-12 and the Big 12. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer that the ACC has to go after this in sort of the same way that the Big 12 has. And the only thing I find interesting about Notre Dame pushing for Stanford and Cal is the fact that they're not even a full member of the ACC.
Because they can make more money not being.
Right. But I mean, it's kind of like, come on, guys, like you're pushing for the survival of this conference, but you're not even willing to commit fully all the way. And I think that does go back a little bit to that old model. And I'm not going to say that Notre Dame right now is digging their heels into the ground, but I do think that I think it would mean a lot more. And I don't think this is going to happen, but I think it would mean a lot more to the conference and to the schools that are potentially joining the ACC if Notre Dame said, you know what, guys, we're all in for the sake of the conference and for the long term, for the next media rights deal, we are all in. Not going to happen. Notre Dame values itself and its football program far more to join the ACC. They want to stay independent as long as they can. But I do think if that were to happen, again, I don't think it will, but if it were to happen, I think that would signal that the ACC is going to come at this from a position of strength.
Well, look, the fact that they want Stanford and Cal in should tell you something. There's a history there that they would like to hang on to. And right now, I believe they make like 20 to 25 million for just being football, and then they get a little bit from the ACC for the other sports. Notre Dame, if you're the ACC, listen to Notre Dame, because if you need a TV partner down the road, and you're appeasing Notre Dame, and you can, like, NBC is going to be in because they don't want to lose Notre Dame, and Notre Dame makes any, you should listen to them because ultimately they could save your butts if they ever decide, like, All right, let's do it. We like this. We've got two of our rivals in this league now, and Cal and Stanford. Like USC's probably dead, unfortunately. Maybe not, but probably. But at least we can keep some of these rivalries. And here we go. Let's just do it, and we'll get and strengthen our TV deal. If you were the ACC and you're going to lose Florida State and Clemson, like Notre Dame is the key to your security, right? Like if you can add Notre Dame, you're fine. Notre Dame can't stay independent forever. I mean, they can right now, but they can't forever. It's probably not in their best interest. In their best interest will be to join at some point, and they're a major player in this. So when they're telling you to add Cal and Stanford, probably listen. By the way, their AD is on like all the committees and stuff. Like you want them in your corner when the dust settles on everything.
It's him and then the other conference commissioners
right
on these committees. Like it's not like there are other athletic directors typically on these committees. It's him and Greg Sankey and Brett Yormark, and it's the commissioners. So I do think that there's significant value there for the ACC to listen to Notre Dame. I would just love to see right now Notre Dame say, guys, we're all in. Let's go. Let's make the ACC even stronger.
So just pay attention, because if you lose some teams, right? One, if you lost Florida State and Clemson, that's how you can pay Cal and Stanford without having to give up any of your own money. Number one, that's how that happens. So that's why they're pushing it, because it ultimately won't cost, because they know Notre Dame knows this what's coming. Like they're paying attention. Guys, these teams are leaving. Get these two to replace them. We'll be in a better position. And then let's go to the table and say, hey, network A or B, let's do a new TV deal. Let's get out ahead of this thing, and we'll throw that one in the trash can and we'll start over. Now, the networks don't want to do that, obviously. But do they want to do it if Notre Dame's on the table? Maybe. Again, sometimes I think you just have to look at this stuff logically, and it makes sense. I get it. I get why they're doing this. I get why SMU wants to join for nothing, right? Because they know this is our only chance to do this. We got to strike now. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline. Let's get, we're not going to give anything away here because we're going to connect with our pal Chelsea Messenger, but we will do a giveaway at the end of the next segment. So stay tuned. We'll get a little betting info and insight on the day as we get ready for football. We know she'll have some baseball for us. That's coming up next on Sports Daily. It's Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing. We'll be right back.
Is the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, Chelsea Messenger. Insider calls are presented by BetMGM. Go check out all of the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. Also, be sure to check out the Daily Tip podcast for more of Chelsea Messenger analysis. Just search BetMGM wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to Sports Daily here. Albracht and Castor welcoming in Chelsea Messenger again for another visit. We have a little football tonight, a little action for you in the football world, and of course, a lot of Major League Baseball. Chelsea, how are you hanging in there? Are you just counting down the minutes until we get football in full force here?
Oh, man. Well, we do get preseason football. You're right. But I can't make myself have the same level of excitement for preseason football. But let me tell you, I have since backpedaled on my stance of under any circumstances, do not bet on the preseason, because I've got some angles today. Because the more you look at something, the more you're like, all right, well, let's look at the numbers. Because tonight we have some coaches who have actually been really good at covering spreads in the preseason. Again, this is the preseason we're talking about, so please tread lightly. But Bill Belichick has been one of those coaches that have covered the number pretty well in recent history, or in his entire history, I should say, 32, 24, and 4 against the spread. And then we look at Pete Carroll in the Seahawks and Vikings game. Pete Carroll is a head coach, 26, 19, and 1 ATS. So I'm not sure what you take away from that. Maybe it's the competitive factor, because we all know the guy in the preseason is John Harbaugh. 38-16-1 ATS. The Ravens winning 23 straight preseason games, going 20-3 against the spread during that stretch. So I'm not sure what you take away from that trend, because I think when you see a trend in betting, you need to be able to explain it. So I don't know. Maybe those coaches are overly competitive. Maybe they have a lot of depth in the organization, but usually those have been the coaches to follow in the preseason.
Chelsea, I know it's really hard to analyze why lines move in a certain way for the preseason, but looking at this Texans-Patriots game, the line opened at Houston -1.5. It's now Houston -3.5. Again, it's preseason, so who knows? But I'm wondering, knowing that this Texans team has a brand new rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud, they're clearly building something here for them to get to where they want to go. Is there anything you can buy into that, knowing that this first preseason game, they're favored against Bill Belichick?
Well, I think it's why you said, because we'll probably see a healthy dose of CJ Stroud because they want to see how he looks. But also, it's strange to me that the Texans are favored by 3.5 points in this, because number one, points are at a premium. I think the total in this one's 36.5. And also the fact that this is DeMeco Ryan's first game as a head coach. Wouldn't you think that there might be some bumps in the ride when it comes to your first game coaching? Then you have Bill Belichick on the other side, who, like I said, he's had an entrenched starter for a long time. I know it's not been the case in the recent stretch, but I just told you it's against the spread record over the last, 20 years. And it's been pretty good. And that's even with Tom Brady not playing in most of the preseason games. So I think I'd still lean towards the Patriots getting the 3.5.
Is there anything, what do you look for right now? Is there anything, Chelsea Messenger, our betting insider, joining us? Anything that you could see perhaps in the preseason that might sway what you are thinking in the regular season? Or do you just outside of a major injury, obviously, or do you just let it go? Like, are there, questions with teams that you look for answers now that might give you a little clarity down the road?
I think there are very specific cases. Like if there is a young player who you want to see kind of how he looks in the NFL, and obviously this is a preseason, they're probably not going against the best NFL defenses, but quarterbacks, I think that's the main one, is you want to see how they're learning the playbook and how they gel with their receivers. But I don't think you take too much out of it, because nobody writes about the preseason All-Stars and, then they go on to win the Super Bowl. So it's just, I think you can watch specific players and maybe you can analyze some things about the young players, but I wouldn't say that I am changing a futures bet because of something I saw in the first preseason game of the season.
This later game tonight, the Vikings and the Seahawks, Geno Smith was a revelation last year for the Seahawks. Obviously, again, it's preseason, so may see him briefly, maybe, I guess, but not anything, crazy from him. But I know that the Seahawks are favored in this opening game. And I think a lot of that probably comes back onto Pete Carroll, like you mentioned, his record in the preseason. But I always like watching matchups between coaches that are incredibly experienced in their job versus coaches that are fairly new in their position. We just talked about Bill Belichick and DeMeco Ryans, kind of the same way in this other matchup with Pete Carroll and Kevin O'Connell. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell's been with Minnesota now for a year, but I wonder if when you're trying to find angles in preseason football, how much stock do you put in to the experience that a head coach has if they're up against more of an inexperienced head coach?
I think it plays a factor in some regard. At the end of the day, I need to hammer home this point because it still rings true. These coaches don't care if they win the game. So you need to keep that in mind. But going back to this original point is you see it in against the spread records for some of these really good coaches. But I'll say this, Andy Reid, which I think we can all agree is one of the best coaches in the NFL, not great against the number when it comes to the preseason. It just feels like it boils down to some coaches want to win in the preseason and some coaches really do not care. I think Nick Sirianni has a really bad record against the spread in limited time in the preseason as well. So it just feels like you're trying to overanalyze something that probably, if you want to bet on it for fun, that's fine. but do not bet the house on preseason football. That is my final word.
All right, let's switch to Major League Baseball then. Chelsea Messenger, host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, here with us each and every Thursday. Chelsea, it's a shorter slate in baseball, but I know you've always got your eye on Major League Baseball. What are we looking at tonight?
Yeah, play of the day is going to be the Toronto Blue Jays on the money line, -130 over the Guardians today. I think if you can fade Noah Syndergaard at a cheap price, you better do it, because Noah Syndergaard has not been good for the Cleveland Guardians, and he's not really been good this season for any team that he has played for. Over his last 5 games, ERA over 8, and he has allowed at least 5 runs in 4 of his last 5 starts. I don't think that bodes well going against the Blue Jays. Even without Bo Bichette in the lineup right now, he's hurt. Still a top 10 offense over the last month. And then speaking of offenses, Noah Syndergaard also gets the luxury, as I'm laughing, of being backed by one of the worst offenses in baseball. That's the Guardians' issue, is they usually have solid pitching. They have a good bullpen, but they can't score runs. Over the last 3 weeks, they have the 3rd worst WRC+, which is probably the best metric at predicting offenses. So it's not an offense I want to back. And on the other end, you do have Alek Manoah, who some people say, well, speaking of fade-worthy pitchers, Alek Manoah has actually been a lot better. In his last 3 starts, allowing 3 runs or fewer, coming off a quality start against the Red Sox, giving up just 3 runs over 6 2/3. Feels like he's found something, and also he's backed by the better offense. So I'll take the Blue Jays today.
Chelsea, we're about 2 weeks past the trade deadline in Major League Baseball, and there have been a couple of teams that have done really well since the trade deadline with the moves they've made, and then there are other teams, hint, hint, the Angels, that have not. They've been terrible since the trade deadline. How have things changed from what you've been able to tell in futures as we look ahead to the postseason in Major League Baseball past the trade deadline?
It feels like the 2 juggernauts are starting to rear their, I don't want to say ugly heads, but they're not teams I want to root for. The Astros and the Dodgers, once again, look like the best teams in all of baseball. I believe the Astros 4-1 over their last 5 games. They've been taking the Orioles to the woodshed, which is no easy feat for a very good Orioles squad. And it seems like they're getting healthy. And plus, think about their first 4 batters. Who is it? Altuve, Bregman, Kyle Tucker's really good, and then you have the cleanup hitter and Yordan Alvarez. It feels like a top-heavy lineup, but still one of the most dangerous lineups in the postseason. It feels like their addition of Justin Verlander was a huge one, because in the short term, I think you look back at last night and you say, wow, the Phillies added a guy that just threw a no-hitter in Michael Lorenzen, and what a good addition. I think that was one of the moves that wasn't like the splashiest of moves, but those are sometimes the moves that can propel you to a late season run. And the Phillies did exactly that last year. So maybe look out for the Phillies. But I'd still say it's the Astros and the Dodgers. The Dodgers are just getting healthier. I believe Walker Buehler's supposed to be returning at some point. So those are the teams I kind of have my eye on as, unfortunately, rising to the top yet again.
All right, so we got the Blue Jays today, Chelsea. Anything else to look at as we make our way through and before we let you go here?
I think that's going to be the only play for me today. Even though maybe the Orioles at plus money, Orioles have been really good at home, and Orioles have been really good as underdogs. In fact, they've been the most profitable team to bet on in baseball for the entire stretch of the season, because they've won a lot of those games in which they have been at plus money. So maybe take a look at the Orioles too.
All right, Chelsea, we appreciate it. We're getting close. It's right there for us as we make our way toward the NFL season. Glad we got baseball to get us through it, and appreciate you stopping by again here on Sports Daily.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
That was the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, Chelsea Messenger Insider Calls, presented by BetMGM. Go check out all the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. All right, let's give something away here. Let's start today with the Thomas Rhett tickets, Jad. So Thomas Rhett, country music star, coming to Intrust Bank Arena next week. We want to send you and somebody on the way there on us pair of tickets right now to our second caller during the break here to the IHOP hotline. The number is 869-1240. Give us a call. Second caller will get a pair of Thomas Rhett tickets next week. Jad will get us a winner. We'll be back with more Sports Daily right after this. right, welcome back in, everybody. Congratulations to Scott, who's going to see Thomas Rhett, courtesy of us here on Sports Daily and KFH. Your chance to win more prizes coming throughout the show here. We've got you until 11 o'clock. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here on Sports Daily. Tommy, those preseason games tonight, how interested are you in preseason games in general?
In general, yeah. I mean, I am interested. I'm into them. I'm not like following every single snap, every single possession, but I am into them. Mainly because it's been so long since we've
Right.
had football, so it's something. So I'll be watching them. There's no doubt about that. But I probably won't be like analyzing every single play.
Yeah, I don't know how much. I mean, I like watching the Chiefs in the preseason or the Cowboys. From a general perspective, though, I mean, honestly, like I just want to see the rookie quarterbacks most of the time. So like CJ Stroud tonight, like I'm interested in that. And I can consume that through highlights and other ways. But, for games that don't feature teams that I particularly follow, it's really, to me, the preseason is about two things: staying healthy and seeing the rookie quarterbacks and how they look and trying to get some feel of what they might be able to do as rookies. CJ Stroud, the Texans went big in the draft, right? They take Stroud and then they come back with the next pick and they take the guy everybody thought they were going to take anyway, the great defender, Will Anderson. So the Texans are as interesting a preseason team, I think, as we have. They've John Mechie's back. Remember, he had the cancer last year. He's back. They drafted another receiver in Tank Dell. Like the Texans are, if you're like power ranking the teams that could be interesting in the preseason, I think they're one of them. I'm curious to see how this goes. I'm curious to see CJ Stroud. He feels like he's going to be at minimum, an okay NFL quarterback. But the Texans, who mismanaged things for so long, Tommy, feel like they've done two things. They've set themselves up. They've got their quarterback. But, man, in the NFL, if you don't set these quarterbacks up for success right out of the gates, you're not doing it right. Like, to bring in rookie quarterbacks to terrible teams and just throw them to the wolves, I mean, it never works anymore. And so you've got, they spent a lot of money on the offensive line with Laramie Tunzel. They have all these weapons now on offense that they've brought in. I feel like they've put CJ Stroud in a pretty good situation to succeed and get off to as good a start as he can possibly get off to.
Yeah, and the fact that they rode with Davis Mills last year, when I think everybody who looked at Davis Mills could say, okay, he's not going to be a long-term starting quarterback in the NFL. I think it tells you how bought in they are on CJ Stroud. And this will be his first look at action in the NFL. And I'm really curious to see how that goes. They've got Dameon Pierce, and he should be healthy this year. And he was kind of a revelation, I felt like, last season before he got hurt running the football. And so the fact that he's back now, that does strengthen their run game a little bit. Maybe we'll take a little bit of pressure off of CJ Stroud. They do have other weapons that they brought in. Robert Woods is now a Texan. Dalton Schultz is now a Texan. So there are, some other players on that team now, as far as skill players, that can, again, take some of the burden off of the rookie quarterback's shoulders. So I think that although it's not usually advised to put a rookie quarterback into the fire right away, I do think the Texans have done more than enough to at least shelter him and shield him if they're going to put him out there right away.
I don't mind putting him out there right away, as long as they're in a good situation. So let's take, for instance, Bryce Young in Carolina. Again, they've done a pretty good job there, of doing things to help him. They brought in Adam Thielen. I know they had to give up DJ Moore to get him, but they have an interesting wide receiver group. They went out and spent more money than anybody in free agency to get Miles Sanders at that position to help him. So, they've done some things as well, and the reviews on him have been fantastic so far out of camp. And then you have Anthony Richardson, where the Colts are doing the opposite. Colts are doing everything they can not to help him. You know what would help Anthony Richardson? Jonathan Taylor.
A running back, Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. I don't
You know
think
what
that's going to happen, though.
You know what would give the Colts a chance to be really dynamic? A read option that features Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. And I don't know, Anthony Richardson hasn't been named the starter, I don't believe. Don't they have Gardner Minshew there too?
I think they're rolling Gardner Minshew out at least to get started. You're gonna have a week one, a quarterback running back combo probably of Gardner Minshew and Deion Jackson. That looks like probably who the Colts are going to trot out there in week one. Good luck to them.
Just scratch your head sometimes. All right, we'll come back. We'll continue that discussion we started with the latest there, Notre Dame's involvement in this ACC, fiddling that's happening right now. We'll get into that. We'll get into some other stories on the day as well. Some interesting things out there. The Shockers went unbeaten in Greece. How about that? And we'll kind of look back as much as we can at what we thought of that trip. We just barely scratched the surface. Didn't have a chance to get into the Eric Bieniemy situation yesterday. We'll do that on our way out here. Let's give away the HTO here. Iced tea cards, 2 of them for one lucky winner. They'd be good for HTO Wichita in the East and in the West. You can get your hands on a couple of free iced teas coming soon in Derby as well. We'll do that to the first caller here during the break. More giveaways coming in the second one. Some big giveaways in the second hour. But let's do the tea now. 869-1240. Chad will get us a winner. Hour number 2 coming right up. Welcome back in, everybody. Hour number 2 of Sports Daily. Congratulations to Joshua for getting some HTO iced tea, 2 free teas on us here at Sports Daily. We've got a Def Leppard Motley Crue giveaway coming up this hour, and we also have Blue Beetle sneak preview movie tickets to give away this hour, so stay tuned for your opportunity to win in those 2 cases. All you got to do is call that IHOP hotline, 869-1240, when we tell you, and you'll get your chance. You can also call it just to chat. You can leave your comments with us on our video stream as well, which you'll find via Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. Tommy also puts that link out on social media there on Twitter for you, or X, or whatever it's called. You all know what we're talking about. All right, let's go back in and finish up on this latest for conference realignment real quick, Tommy. So if you missed our first segment, which, by the way, you can also go back and listen to for free in the aftermath on the free Odyssey app, Notre Dame has reportedly been pushing for Cal and Stanford into the ACC. The presidents met. They don't want to give up any of their money to let 2 teams in. The other story to follow is SMU, who, according to reports, is willing to come in basically and take no share of the TV deal for a little while. And they've got some boosters or something who are willing to foot the bill just to get them in to one of these major leagues. I think everybody's looking at this as like, why would the ACC do that? And then they see Cal and Stanford, and they're like, well, Notre Dame, that's 2 of their big rivals. And 2, I think, Tommy, more than anything, Notre Dame's looking at this realistically and understanding that in the next 5 days, there's a very real chance the ACC loses some teams. And if not, then at some point, the ACC is going to lose some teams. Notre Dame, if like us or me, is sitting there, you can see that it goes one of 2 ways. You either get poached and you die, Pac-12, or you get poached and you try to get stronger by numbers and make sure that you don't get so weak that you fall apart. Because make no mistake, if I'm the Big 12 and I see 2 teams leave and it starts to teeter a little bit, I'm coming in hard. I'm coming in real hard if I'm the Big 12. So what can the ACC do now? Prepare for the inevitable. Florida State's leaving. Florida State is literally out there telling everybody that we're going to leave as soon as we can figure out how to do it, right? They're not even trying to hide it anymore. So they're going to go, and so probably will some others. And when that happens, just be in a good position to do it. And oh, by the way, if you can do that, maybe you get Notre Dame to the negotiating table with you, and you can get this bad deal that you're in now thrown out the window and get a new one.
Yeah, I think that one thing that the ACC has going for its benefit as this all plays out is that they have, number one, they know how the Pac-12 and the Big 12 have done it differently to, obviously the Pac-12's detriment and the Big 12's success, but also they know it's coming, right? Like, I don't know how much the Big 12, when Bob Bowlesby was there, I think they knew that Texas and OU always wanted to leave, but I don't know how prepared they actually were when Texas and Oklahoma left. Maybe they were, but I don't know that for sure. And clearly the Pac-12, they were caught off guard when USC and UCLA left to go to the Big Ten. So what the ACC has right now is an understanding, because Florida State has been so vocal lately about their intentions to leave, they can get out in front of this. They don't have to be caught off guard and then be reactive in how they scramble and go out and try to find ways to survive. The Big 12 kind of had to do that when they went out and got the American teams and BYU. The Pac-12, they didn't do anything at all. Like, they just froze and just said, oh, we're going to be good. We're fine. We don't need to do anything. So the ACC has the opportunity now, since they know that at least one of their schools and probably others are looking to leave and wanting to get out and go where the grass is greener. They can start to prepare for it now and be able to have those conversations right away. That's going to, I would think, if they do it the right way, put them in a stronger position than those other 2 conferences were when they got poached.
There's no doubt about it. And, they get the benefit of Florida State announcing their intentions very publicly, right? Like, there's no question. And the other thing is, when Florida State figures out how to do it, and I think that they will, the only thing I don't know about Florida State is somebody going to take them, right? Like, where does that happen? But they're going to be able to get out. I think this private equity thing is the easiest way for them to do it. You raise the funds in the short term to pay the exit fee, you get out, and and you're making enough money that it makes it worth it. Once they do that, it sets a blueprint for others to do it. And there may be others doing it, just not so publicly, right? So the ACC has a real chance. The ACC has a chance to be just fine. And if you got Notre Dame, I would love to have the conversation with, or not to have it, but to be just to sort of be a fly on the wall, right? If ESPN, who has the ACC deal, right? I think they have it by themselves. I think
they do. I'm pretty sure it's only them.
And NBC has Notre Dame. If Notre Dame finally said, you know what? Let's do it. No more independent. We can see where this is going. We don't have a need to be independent anymore. These leagues are too big. It's going to be too hard for us to schedule the games historically that we want to play. It's just there's too much. It's too difficult. Let's forge a new future. I would be very curious to know if both ESPN and NBC would be willing to come to the table then at that point and do a new deal. If you knew Notre Dame was coming in for football, right? And I don't know what that would look like. It would probably look like, NBC having to sacrifice a handful of games for Notre Dame, which happens already anyway, right? Notre Dame doesn't only play on NBC. They play on the other networks at times. And so you could do that. And then NBC, hey, do you also want to expand your college football footprint with a really good product out of the ACC now that features Notre Dame? And I think NBC would probably be interested in that too. So while the Pac-12 didn't really have anything that was that interesting without USC and UCLA, no matter who leaves the ACC, look at what Notre Dame's commanded just on its own for years. Now I think you have a very interesting product still for other people to get on board with. Now, is it $50 million a year like the Big Ten and the SEC? No, probably not. I would be surprised if it is, but it would certainly be better than what you've got now. And then you're good. And then we would be kind of done with all this. I think that's why a school like SMU is getting pretty desperate here. Like, they want a seat at that table. And I think they're handling things the right way. SMU will be a little bit outcast, but there's a lot of outcast schools in these super leagues, right? And most of the time they're private and they got a lot of money on their own, Vanderbilt. So we'll see. I mean, there is a change coming. My only question is, does it happen before this August 15th deadline for Florida State? Or are we going to sit here and ride this out for a little while? And that's important because it affects the CFP. When do we get that? When's year one of the 12 team? Is it next year? 25, right?
Yeah, next year. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, you're getting closer to that. You want that to be in order. You've got to figure out now without the Pac-12 what that looks like. Here's what I'll guess. It's August 10th at 10:09. Here's my prediction. SMU goes to the ACC. The ACC loses Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, probably Virginia, and maybe Miami. And Notre Dame steps in to save the ACC, save the day, and they get a new deal. And then we're done. Like, that's going to be it. Cal and Stanford would come to the ACC. Washington State and Oregon State will join the Mountain West. That would be my prediction of how this will go. The 12-team CFP would then say they would subtract that number of conference champion auto bids by 1. They would increase the at-larges by the 1 they took away. So that I think right now it's 5 and 7 or 6 and 6. It would just go 1 the other direction, right? You would get your 4 conference champions in and then have whatever it is, 8 at-larges after that, your 4 highest ranked conference champions. And then that's it. And then we're done. And then we go to the future and we blaze this new path and we're good. I think we're getting close to what it'll ultimately be. I don't think I see some Big 12 ACC merger, which is I'm sure what the Big 12 would like to do. I don't know if the ACC falters, if the Big 12 is attractive enough for anybody. It would be interesting to see a team like Duke in that scenario where basketball is a premier part of what they do and we know is what the Big 12 wants to shoot for. But that's what I think is going to happen here. And then I think after we get whatever that next piece is, that big one, right? Like a move the size of what we just saw in the Pac-12, we're going to be done. Like that will be it when we get to that point. And then all this goes away and they just got to figure out the NIL stuff and we move forward. I do think there is a finish line to all of this and we're getting pretty close to it.
The only caveat that I can think of in that is if Notre Dame doesn't want to play ball. Either they want to stay independent, or I've always wondered, especially as all of this is going on, has Notre Dame had conversations with the Big Ten or with the SEC? I mean, because that value is there, and they are a premier enough brand to add value to already strong conferences like the Big Ten or the SEC. I think culture-wise, they probably fit the Big Ten better geographically also than the SEC, but still, I mean, like there's a significant amount of value there. So if Notre Dame depends on what Notre Dame's appetite is. Like if Notre Dame is committed to the ACC, and it sounds like, I mean, they've been pushing for Stanford and Cal, which would lead me to believe they are committed to the conference.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then that could throw everything up in the air. At that point, the ACC is not incredibly strong. They don't have a cornerstone program like Notre Dame anymore. And then I think they're open for poaching. And if that comes from the Big 12, so be it. So I think that would be the only caveat in there. I agree with you that if Notre Dame decides that they want to go all in with the ACC, that they already have a pretty strong seat at the table with the network and NBC. And so they can help lead those discussions. But I'll tell you one thing, the schools that are in the process of looking for a new conference, they are the ones that are making a decision now, not for the current media deal, but for the next media deal. They're the ones that are ultimately going to be rewarded, like SMU. I think it's super smart for SMU to say, we want to jump in to the ACC now, and we don't even care if we make any money. We're not going to make any money. We've got boosters covering it, but we're in it for the next media deal.
Yep.
We're in it for however long that is down the road, where we can secure our place now and cash in later. And I think that the schools that are doing that are the ones that are the most forward thinking and the ones that are going to actually have it pay off for them in the long run.
I don't know how Cal and Stanford are going to be able to get in. You want to talk about scheduling nightmares. That presents a scheduling nightmare. And I don't think that there would be anybody else to bring in to help with that in the ACC. That's the other piece that is a little bit difficult to comprehend. Obviously, SMU would help a little bit. You kind of split the difference that way. But I don't know that any of that matters right now. They've got to figure out this other part. And as far as Notre Dame and the other leagues, this isn't always the case, but for Notre Dame, do you think they'd rather be the big fish in the small pond or the small fish in a big pond?
Well, I think Notre Dame historically, I mean, the reason why they joined the ACC in all sports but football was so they could, in theory, be the big fish in the smaller pond. That hasn't always played out like in basketball.
And that's only a thing for football, by the way. There are other programs don't carry that sort of weight, but the football program does. And if Notre Dame had any interest in going to make the most money, they would have been in the Big Ten a long time ago, in my opinion. I don't think, because right now the contract they have as an independent, I don't think is really much more lucrative than what the ACC football teams get anyway. But I don't think that's what's ultimately the most important thing to them. And so you look at it for them, and I just feel like they don't want to be watered down in any way. And they wouldn't be in the ACC. They certainly would be in the SEC. And in the Big Ten, they would immediately jump up with, Ohio State and Michigan as the top end, and probably, USC at this point. USC is the only thing that makes me say maybe they'd think about it, because that's such a great rivalry. But man, I think they have their eyes set on the ACC long term. If I had to bet where they end up, I don't think they'll be independent that much longer, and I think they'll be in the ACC. If I'm Brett Yormark, I'd probably make that call just in case, just because they don't make so much money now. It's not like when you look at Notre Dame, they're not in it to just go make the most money in a TV deal, or they'd already be in the Big Ten. That's clearly not what they value the most. So, I mean, they've told us that already because they didn't join the Big Ten or anybody, because every league would take them, right? It's not like there's not a league in the country that would be like, no, I don't think we want Notre Dame. Like, they'd all take them. They're outside of Texas, they're probably, and Alabama at this point, they're probably the most valuable football brand in the country. I would venture to guess individually, solely by itself, they're unique that way. So I don't know. We'll see, but they're a big part of this. And I think they're telling us they want the ACC to survive, and the ACC should probably listen, because the other thing we've learned in all this is when the big boys talk, you listen. I mean, you just do. The Big 12 tried to make it better for Texas. Texas was clearly miscast in the Big 12, and Oklahoma too. They tried a variety of things to help. It was inevitable. I don't know how much the Pac-12 tried to help USC and UCLA. Certainly not to the degree that the Big 12 tried with Texas and Oklahoma. So maybe, they were blindsided by a little bit more. But one more big move, I think it's coming. We'll see. 869-1240 is the number to call. Some other storylines to get into today, including Phil Mickelson, $1 billion better, reportedly. Does that surprise anybody? I guess that doesn't really surprise me. We can talk about that story as well. Let's do our movie ticket giveaway here. Blue Beetle coming to Boulevard Theaters in Wichita, and you can check it out a day early. We're giving away a pair of tickets for a special screening on Thursday, August 17th, 7 o'clock. It's at Boulevard Theaters at Town West. Our friends over there hooking you up with some Blue Beetle sneak preview tickets. We'll give that to our first caller right now as we head into the break. Blue Beetle tickets, 869-1240 on that IHOP hotline. That'll get us a winner. We'll be right back. right, welcome back. Congratulations to Tim, headed to see Blue Beetle next Thursday at Boulevard Theater. Congrats on the win there, Tim. All right, Tommy, this one's got your attention. Phil Mickelson, $1 billion reportedly, according to a new book coming out, has been bet over his career. That doesn't surprise me at all. I think that I would almost expect it. The dude likes to bet, and he's got lots and lots and lots and lots of money. And I'm not sure that we've ever, heard about or publicly had an idea of anybody outside of maybe like Michael Jordan that likes to, bet as much as Phil Mickelson does.
I think it was the dollar amount. I mean, I knew that he had gambled away millions upon millions of dollars, but this new book says that he has bet more than $1 billion. Like the B in front of it, it's hard for me to wrap my head around on football, basketball, and baseball over the last 3 decades. And I think the thing that's shocking in this revelation in this book is that he attempted, allegedly, to place a $400,000 bet on the Ryder Cup in 2012, and he was playing in that event. Ultimately, the bet didn't go through, and the U.S. actually lost that Ryder Cup, but the allegation is that he tried to bet on his team. He was playing in the Ryder Cup for $400,000. That part was shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, that part, if it's true, I mean, I don't want to just believe everything that comes out in a book either. I'm never surprised by the ultimate competitors wanting to bet on themselves. There's a line there that you can't do, and who knows if he made that? Who knows if that story is even true? I mean, most of the, not to be, but I'll be a devil's advocate here. Isn't most of the sourcing on this story to the other biggest bettor in the world?
Yeah, it's Billy Walters' book, and they did have a falling out.
Who has a vendetta against Phil Mickelson?
Yeah. Well, they had a falling out because Walters went to prison
right,
for fraud. And I think he's out of prison now. I'm pretty sure that his sentence got commuted by Donald Trump. But regardless, they had a falling out, and Walters believes that had Mickelson testified on his behalf in the trial, he wouldn't have gone to prison. So yeah, I mean, there's an axe to grind for sure against Phil Mickelson, but it's not like, I don't know. I think that there's a line here, and Mickelson himself has even admitted in the past that his gambling has been reckless and an addiction and, all of that. But there's a line here between really, really liking to gamble and having a lot of money and being involved in borderline, if not full-fledged, illegal activity. And
sure,
there's been allegations that Phil Mickelson has been a part of money laundering schemes and has been tied to a mafia bookie, like all these different things. There was an investigation into money laundering in 2015. He was apparently alleged to be a part of it, although not maybe not knowing that it was money laundering. Regardless, though, you get to a point to where you are gambling enough and you are placing those large of bets. I mean, it does invite a higher risk of getting involved with some really bad people. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened here, but I mean, I'm glad it sounds like he's kind of moved away from that part of his life, which is good. But yeah, certainly for a while it was really bad.
Again, everything that comes, I'm going to take with a grain of salt, considering the source. I don't know anything about Billy Walters other than he has an axe to grind, clearly. And, we'll see whether Phil wanted to bet on the Ryder Cup or not. I have no idea. I don't know. But what I do know is Phil Mickelson may be the most, think of the public perception of him. And maybe it's a little less this now with the LIV and all that stuff. But think back when most of this stuff was happening, Phil Mickelson was this lovable, guy on tour that just seemed so relatable. And gosh, we really want Phil. And I'm not even saying that's not his genuine personality. I think it very well might be, right? He seems like he'd be a lot of fun to hang out with and just, fairly regular, except he likes to bet large amounts of money. But man, it just seems so miscast when you hear this stuff versus the perception of Phil Mickelson forever, which was the most lovable guy out there, right? Just sweet old Phil. Can't get
Yeah,
that win, and he finally does.
That reputation is gone now. And it's not because of the gambling necessarily. It's because of what happened around him going to the Live Tour and the comments he made and talking about the Saudis and, accepting quote unquote blood money from them to join the league. He basically, I'll tell you right now, Phil Mickelson, when I was growing up, was my favorite golfer. I loved watching Tiger Woods because of how incredible he was, but Phil Mickelson is left-handed. I'm left-handed. I obviously not nearly as good of a golfer as he is, but
of
like
weirdos.
I get, but bottom line, like I grew up, he was my favorite golfer because he had that lovable personality. He won the Masters, finally broke through. There was a period of time, I don't know if you remember this, like 15, 20 years ago, his wife and his mother were both battling breast cancer at the same time. Yep. And he was winning majors and dedicating wins to them. Like that was really cool. That was a really good feel good story. And, the guy walks around the course giving thumbs up and signing autographs and big smile on his face and all. And then all hell breaks loose when Liv comes on to the scene and offers him an obscene amount of money. He takes it. Then he says that he doesn't, he's scared of the Saudis or that they're scary people. But then basically sells out the PGA. Ultimately, his reputation has suffered immensely over the last couple of years, and I'm not sure he'll ever get that back. It's not because of gambling, but this does add on another layer of sort of what we are learning about Phil Mickelson from behind the scenes.
I think it just adds to, sometimes we forget the different lives we live. I might lose sleep at night if I lose $50 betting.
Yeah.
Dude's bet $1 billion. And the net loss claim there's 100 million, which that really would be a drop in the bucket to Phil. But it's interesting. And look, the LIV stuff, I caution this from the beginning. Careful of your judgment, because that stuff's that money's everywhere. And look what happened, right? He was right. Like the PGA Tour just did the same thing. Like he was just upfront and honest about it. And he just did it in the beginning instead of.
He said the quiet part out loud, and he was the first one to do that, and caught a ton of grief about it. And now I do think that those comments at the time and even today were wrong. They were reckless comments that he made, and I will always believe that. But I think he has been vindicated a little bit with what has happened with the PGA Tour. But the sad thing about it is I'm not sure his reputation will ever fully bounce back from where it was.
No, it is not. It's you know what? When the dust settles, I actually do think he'll be remembered just as fondly as he ever was. I think people just like Phil, and he makes sense to people. He has always seemed like, and you see him having fun. That's the thing on the course. Saw some video the other day where some guy does something and he's like, all right, well, what are we betting on the round? Like it was like some charity event. And the guy's like, well, I haven't really thought about that. And he's like, what do you mean you haven't thought about that? That's all of us, right? Like that's every time we go out onto the golf course. It's like, all right, what are we playing for here?
It's just, we're playing for $10 and he's playing for 25 grand, or more on a round, so it's a little bit of it's different for sure. But
I'll bet he would want to stomp you just as much in a $10 round as he would in a round for 20. He just has the money, right? Like that's the big difference to me. Like we could play for $1 and all of a sudden it's like, all right, now we're playing for real here. Like, cause something's on the line. I don't know. Phil's he's an interesting character in a sport that sometimes doesn't have the most interesting people involved. I think he's been one of them for a very, very long time in that sport. Let's get to the rest of the Eric Bieniemy thing here, Tommy, before we take a quick break. So Eric Bieniemy, and now Ron Rivera is coming back, was like, yeah, I kind of stuck my foot in my mouth. It's so interesting to me to see Eric Bieniemy, and this is good for him, by the way. I think, has there been a more talked about coordinator that you can remember for as long as he's been talked about? He has got to be the most well-known and talked about coordinator we've had since Charlie Weiss was a coordinator in New England a long time ago, right? Like, it's crazy.
No, there's not. There is not another coordinator that I can think of. And maybe it is Charlie Weiss. I'm trying to think of others that have been, as talked about as or as Eric Bieniemy. I do think it's good to an extent, but I also think that the more that he is in, in the public eye and the comments and everything, I think that Eric Bieniemy would prefer to let his work do the talking, and not necessarily just have different media outlets reporting on him and his style. The guy is interviewed with like more than half of the teams in the NFL for head coach openings and hasn't gotten any of them. So I think that that's part of it too. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. We can say all day long, and I think you mentioned it yesterday, that if this Washington offense improves under him, that he will be a head coach next year. I'd like to think that, but history tells us that that hasn't been the case for Eric Bieniemy. So I don't know what more it's going to take, and it might be resurrecting a Washington offense that has been very bad the last couple of years. Maybe that's what it takes. But I guess, sadly, when it comes to Bieniemy and teams wanting to take a shot on him, I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, it's getting out of Andy Reid's shadow is what it is. I mean, that I think when push comes to shove, that's always been the most challenging thing for him is it's perceived to be Andy Reid's offense. And doesn't help that a lot of the time, some of the people that leave that haven't done well. Matt Nagy, who's back. Doug Peterson, not the example there of somebody that's gone and had some success, but Bieniemy's got a chance to do it. The real question is how much does it fit with Ron Rivera? And, I see a lot of the former players now. All these players are soft. They just can't handle hard coaching and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe so. I mean, that might be the case, but it's he ain't going to change his style. I mean, that's EB. And
that's what I like about him is, think about the number of interviews that he's been on for a head coaching position in the NFL over the last 3 years. And I guarantee that he received feedback from these teams about, hey, look, we like you. We're not sure that your style fits as a head coach. If you adjust your style and the way you do things, and if you're softer or whatever that approach is, you're going to be more hireable as a head coach. I guarantee you he's gotten that feedback, whether it's been from NFL teams he's interviewed with or other people that know him that are advising him on becoming a head coach. And what I like about Eric Bieniemy is that he's like, nah, like that's not me. That's not how I roll. That's not how I operate. I've got to be true to myself. And this is the way that I coach. And if that means I'm not going to be an NFL head coach, then I guess that's what it means. And what I like about that too is the fact that had he shifted his approach to things, he's not being true and he's playing a part. And I think that the chances of him being successful by doing something different than what he's used to, those chances go down significantly.
You got to adapt. I mean, if the world's telling you you're not doing something right and it's not working, you got to adapt or you're not going to succeed. So I agree with that to some level, but like if we knew that it was that style that rubbed people the wrong way in Kansas City during that brief moment of clear conflict with some of the players, that would be one thing. But I don't think that's what it was, right? Like, because there's been enough players that have backed him up here that would have been a part of that it's like, I don't think that was the point of any conflict. I mean, he's just he's an old hard-nosed coach, right? So was, so is Bill Belichick. So was Bill Parcells. And those guys, I think, for the most part, are remembered relatively fondly. Wichita State's Bill Parcells, by the way. That always surprises me. Is one of the cool little nuggets out there. 869-1240 is the number to call. All right, Jad, let's get people excited here before we take this break because we got another giveaway. This is the big one. Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Guitar Heroes Unite, the World Tour coming to H.A. Chapman Stadium in Tulsa. It's August 16th. Special guest Alice Cooper, and you can get a pair of tickets to see that show on us here at Sports Daily. We'll do it for our third caller. Get ready. Let the hair down. Get ready to rock and roll and head to Tulsa for that concert. 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. Good luck. We'll get you a winner on the other side and continue on Sports Daily. All right. Welcome back in. Sports Daily here. Congratulations, Nathan, winner of our Def Leppard Motley Crue ticket giveaway. One more pair of those to go tomorrow. We'll give away all of our goodies again tomorrow, which include Thomas Rhett tickets, Blue Beetle movie tickets, HDO free iced tea, and those Def Leppard Motley Crue tickets. Appreciate everybody hanging out the last couple of weeks as we get through some major giveaways here on the show and on KFH. The Shockers get back from Greece, Tommy, and they're undefeated in Greece, which means something. I mean, I don't know what it means. KU lost a game in its exhibition filled with the Bahamian national team, which had NBA players on it. So, I don't know how much the outcomes matter. And without being able to see the games, you like to see them winning. You just love that they're getting the time as much as anything else. I don't know how the dinos are of the University of Calgary, but what I do know is a trip overseas, if you're not playing games, but just doing, the team development stuff matters. The extra practice matters. The games matter too. And it's good to see them win. They won all three by double digits.
Yeah, I think you got to be kind of general, in your assessment of that, because you just don't know. You don't know the level of competition. Sure, like, the wins are great, especially when they're exhibition games and this is a new squad for the most part. Learning how to win together as a team, I think, is incredibly important. But we can't get into the X's and O's and all of that. We just don't really know the level of competition. But I do think that anytime that a team can go overseas or play a series of exhibition games, you're going to grow together as a group. You're going to, learn each other. It's going to give, like in this case, Paul Mills a big opportunity to be able to sort of figure out what he likes about the team, what they need to work on, maybe even what rotations might look like, who's going to get into the starting five, all of those things that if you didn't have an exhibition series, you wouldn't be able to really be able to know until official practices begin. So I think all of this is positive. I just, it's hard when you're not actually watching the games and you can't really dial into how it's all actually going.
I'll tell you what I take away is Quincy Ballard. Quincy Ballard, we didn't get to see really any of last year. He was double digits in each of the three games. And I want you to go to GoShockers.com and look at the story about yesterday's game and just look at the size of him right now and how big he is. Like, go to Go Shockers and go look. Kenny Poto is not too far away from him, and he's kind of hidden a little bit. But, man, Ballard towers and is jacked and is really interesting in this with that sort of physical profile and good performances in all three of these games, Tommy. Like, Quincy Ballard, we haven't talked a lot about him because he's not a new guy necessarily. He came back. You didn't get to see him much last year, but that's a really interesting player for the program. So that's really what stood out to me is the fact that he had three good games. I envision, the possibility of whether he and Poto are on the floor at the same time or, just sort of rotate. That's something not a lot of teams are going to be able to match, just that direct size there. And, how that's used by Paul Mills, I don't know. Again, not seeing how they played, but seeing the scores, fast pace, right? Like you're not getting up to 84 points in an old school, grinded out Shocker style, 84-73 in the most recent game. That tells me that it will look a little different. So how do these guys fit in? But man, Ballard just looks enormous right now. And he had three good games, and that could be a big development for this program too. I got to tell you, my gut says things are going well and will go well next year for the program. It's just very early gut. Like, I think this is going to be good.
By the way, they also have Jacob Germany, who, comes over from UTSA and probably was their most accomplished transfer that they brought into the program. In Paul Mills' first transfer portal time with Wichita State. He was the one that probably played. I think he did play the most minutes on his respective team out of anybody else that transferred into Wichita State, and he's a big guy too. So, if they can have a pretty dominant position there down low with Germany, Quincy Ballard, Kenny Poto, whatever that looks like, I do feel like that is such a benefit to this squad, and to a point to where they didn't really have as much of that last season, and that certainly was an area that Paul Mills needed and wanted to improve on. So, the fact that Ballard had a really good exhibition series, I think that bodes well for the way that this team is developing overall and the way that they want to play.
Jacob Germany didn't play in Greece, so we didn't get to see him out there. He had I think it was a family emergency or a family issue or something happened right before Taylor Eldridge. I remember put that out there right before they went. But, there were times where Poto and Ballard both definitely played at the same time. That also tells me that I don't think Kenny Poto is going to be a traditional center. Whatever it is he ends up doing, I think they're going to stretch him out a little bit. We know he can shoot. We know he's a different kind of athlete. So, again, like, maybe Germany and Ballard can take over that and really let Poto shine and blossom and do whatever it is that he's going to do. I've said it for a long time. Kenny Poto, to me, is the most interesting player on this roster. He has the opportunity now in this new system to show us things I think we haven't seen. And I think the fact that he stayed should probably tell us something. So a good trip for the Shockers. They get it done in Greece. We'll get a breakdown here soon with the program. See, finally have some hoops to talk when it comes to Wichita State basketball. That's the other nice thing for us about, exhibition tournaments is they give us actual basketball and not like philosophical things to talk about. Like we can say, hey, how did you look on the court, right? Like, what are you learning here? So that part of it, certainly looking forward to as well as we continue to look through things with the Shockers. Don't forget, we get the preseason starting tonight across the NFL. We mentioned it earlier, CJ Stroud, kind of all eyes on it for me. You have any interest in the second game, Minnesota-Seattle? There's nothing there for me that I really have that much interest in.
Again, I'll have it on and I'm going to watch it. And part of the reason why, by the way, I have not had NFL Network for the last, 2 or 3 years, just based on the cable package that I had. Finally cut the cord, and I've got NFL Network back now. And so the fact that both of these games are on NFL Network, for sure I'm going to watch, because I haven't had a chance to do that over the last couple of years.
Well, good luck with that. I'll watch the highlights, maybe. Like Jordan Addison, it's really the rookies. Like, Minnesota and Seattle aren't going to show us anything, I don't think. I think those are two teams that look like they're going to be, playoff contenders. But again, like, how much do we get to see? Like, if I'm Minnesota, Kirk Cousins is on ice for me. And probably if I'm Seattle, it's the same thing for Geno Smith. Real quick on Geno Smith. He had a great year last year. How real do you think that was? I mean, he got his contract. He got, a nice extension. I think he's got a chance to at least repeat it. I mean, look at their wide receiver room. Like, Geno Smith has been a really interesting player to watch, and I love it. I hope he does awesome. He'll never have probably 3 better receivers together than he will this year, because I don't think all 3 of them are staying together after this year. But Seattle's a pretty interesting squad this year that might be flying under the radar a little bit.
They're not going to fly under the radar as much as they did a season ago. Like, nobody thought that the Seahawks were going to do anything.
Everyone thought they were going to be the worst team in football.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were there and competing to the very end. And Geno Smith, I think, was well-deserved to win that Comeback Player of the Year award. I think he can repeat that for sure, because he does have super talented receivers in Metcalf and Lockett and JSN. They drafted him. So I think that they've got that opportunity there. My big question comes into the running game. Like, who do they have healthy? Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. Like, they've got some guys that I think can make an impact, but they've got to stay healthy. And that's going to be my big question on this team.
Yeah, we'll see. That's a weird division, quite frankly. San Francisco seems to have it on lock. How good are the Rams going to be if Matt Stafford's healthy? I mean, that's my question. Probably pretty good, right? Probably, I think, if he's healthy. That's the big question.
How healthy is Cooper Kupp going to be? I mean, Cooper Kupp is he's 30 now? And so he was injured last year. I mean, I think that's a big question mark too.
I think he'll be okay, but I don't think it'll be for that much longer. I hope he is for at least a couple more years because I think he's pretty close to the Hall of Fame, honestly. If you believe, if you can believe it or not, I think he's close. All right. Congratulations again, all our giveaway winners. We'll come back. We'll put a bow on it, tell you what's on tap today. The Sports Daily returns right after this. All right, that's it, everybody. Congratulations again, everybody, to all the wins. A lot of fun today coming up on the network. Jim Rome follows us here at 11 before Bob and Jeff take over from 2 to 4. You get CBS Sports Radio programming until 6 o'clock, where the Royals will take on the Red Sox right here on KFH. Got a big Friday coming up for you tomorrow. Lots more giveaways, so stay tuned for that. Tommy, happy Thursday.
Sounds great. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
For Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. See you then.